Yeah, Steve with you then until 2 o'clock. In a few minutes' time, we're gonna remember 1964 and offshore radio starting off the Essex coast. We'll do that in a jiffy. So yeah, let's remember, shall we? In a few moments, yeah, the 1960s. After this song from Odyssey. Sal's been in touch with us this morning. Happy New Year to you, Sal. She says, I remember Radio Caroline, listening under the bed sheets, and also Radio Luxembourg too. I'm sure many of us remember it, Sal, and thank you for being there this morning. Yeah, it was 60 years ago this year that radio revolution took place. Radio Caroline started broadcasting off the Essex coast. We could see it from Brinton. And I'm sure, like me, so many of us will remember this little bit of music. Yeah, the theme tune to Radio Caroline. I don't know where that version came from, but I remember it by The Fortunes, and I'm sure you do too. Well, that theme tune by The Fortunes, it was 60 years ago this Easter that they started broadcasting off the Essex coast. And as a teenager, it was my dream job to work on one of those many stations off the Essex coast. Well, in 2004, on the 20th anniversary of that momentous moment, that dream came true. Along with colleagues here at BBC Essex, we launched something called Pirate BBC Essex. One of the DJs who joined us back then, in 2004, was a Radio Caroline original, Roger Day. And I spoke to him just before the programme today to wish him a Happy New Year and asked him how his interest in radio started.
Well, Happy New Year, by the way, and thanks for having me on the programme. It's lovely to be on BBC Essex. It's fabulous stuff. I suppose, like many people, I was listening to Radio Luxembourg in the evening, fading in and out and playing about half the records, always when we're trying to find out the name of the record they were playing, and Jack Jackson and people like that. And that was in the evening when I was doing my homework. Well, I should have been doing my homework, but I was kind of ignoring that. And during the day, later on, I found Radio Veronica, which I didn't know was on a ship at the time, but it was in Dutch, but they were playing blooming good music. And I've always had a soft spot for them as a result. And of course, then it was the BBC Light programme, which had about 4 hours of pop music a week, which is unbelievable. There was Saturday Club with the great Brian Matthew, and Easy Beat, again with the great Brian Matthew. So that was the pop music. So we were starved of all that great music that was around.
So how did you feel then when you heard Radio Caroline broadcast for the first time that Easter, 1964?
Well, I just happened to be flicking round the dial between Radio Veronica and Radio Luxembourg, and where there had been nothing the day before, there was this music coming out. It's just fate, I guess, that I heard that first broadcast. There was whoever said it. It wasn't Simon D, was it? It was the other bloke who said, "This is your all-day music station, Radio Caroline." I thought, what? I didn't even know it was on a ship then, but of course, eventually it became obvious that they were on a ship when they described what they were doing out there, and I was just smitten with it, and I've been smitten ever since. You know, I'm a grade 1 anorak, as we call them. I just took a radio with me everywhere, like most people did, because it was only on from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. in those days, and I didn't want to miss anything because it was so good to listen to. There were no bad bits about it. Looking back, it probably was, but it didn't seem it at the time.
So at what point then, in this little timetable you've set out, did you think that you might like to be a DJ on one of these ships?
Well, I'd always wanted to be a DJ even before that, listening to Radio Luxembourg. I even said to the careers master at the grammar school, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a disc jockey on Luxembourg." And he looked shocked. And he said, "Well, you're good at maths. I think you'd be better off being an accountant, because I don't know how you'd get to be a DJ. I'd love to have met him in the later years." Said, "Really? You got that wrong, didn't you?"
That's so strange, because at school I'm a little bit younger than you, Rog. Not much, a little bit younger.
Everybody is.
And I wanted to be a DJ on Radio Caroline, and I told my careers master that's what I wanted to do when I left school. But of course, in 1967, things changed a bit, and I remember going to school that September after August the 14th, 67, and the careers master said to me, "What are you going to do now, boy? Your beloved job's gone off the pirate stations. There's only one of them left, and I'm sure they won't take you." So I had to think about something else to do. But of course, it was at that time, Roger, that you joined Radio Caroline, hadn't you?
I had, yes. Started in Radio England, obviously in 1966, having done the club circuit, learning my trade that way. And then when Radio England went off after about 6 months, and Johnny Walker jumped ship first and got there, I got on in July 1967 because basically I'd always wanted to work for them anyway. Most of the big stars were leaving because they didn't want to risk going to jail or the big fine that Harold Wilson and his mob had put in on the Marine Offences Act. And I remember they phoned me up and said, we're going to be made illegal and we'd like to offer you a job. I thought, yeah, you're just desperate, that's why. But it didn't bother me because I didn't believe in what they were doing to the stations, and I wanted to fight for free radio, as we said. And I went out there in a couple of weeks where we had the normal thing with a tender every day. And then, of course, we had to go and live in Holland. But I had no regrets. I didn't care if they put me in jail. I just felt so strongly about what was happening. And we had to do it. So it was, and when I set foot on the ship, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is why I'm on this earth. I mean, people would say, you're sure? I said, yeah, I really did. I felt at home on there. I regarded that as my home.
And indeed, it did become your home for quite a few months because you managed to keep broadcasting once it became illegal. And I don't know how you felt about that, but it must have been a strange feeling having gone to work for Caroline when it was legal to do so, and then going through August the 14th when you came back after the Marine Offences Act. You were then a criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the people say my broadcasts are criminal, but certainly the authorities put it that way. The bond with the listener got stronger after August the 14th, 1967, because people were standing by us as well. And we were like the Robin Hoods of the modern day. And they just kept us... the mail went up and everything. They sent us presents. We had to say something on there like we like Smarties, and they'd send us stuff like that. There was a certain bond, and for a while we were scared to come back to the UK because we didn't want to be arrested. But I was the first one to actually test that out.
I think so, and you talk about that in your book, Pirate of the Airwaves, which is doing great business actually for you, Roger. I just must ask you about your nickname Twiggy, because everybody knows you as Roger Twiggy Day, and in fact I'm going to come back to it in a second, but when you were broadcasting on Caroline, when it became illegal, you were doing the breakfast show. That was your main show, and did you realise how many it was at that point? You had millions of listeners. Did you realise that you had such a following?
Yeah, pretty soon. I mean, Radio England was okay, but we never got the response in the mail that Caroline did. I mean, I remember the first tender came out, and I hadn't been on there very long, and there was this sack full of mail. And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "That's your mail." I couldn't believe it. It's real big time. Because at first I wasn't doing the breakfast show; I was doing bits and pieces. And Johnny Walker was, because for 6 weeks we were the only station on air or something like that before Radio 1 started. So we must have the biggest radio audience ever, because even the Radio London people came over to listen to us. And because Johnny was already established on Caroline, the big name, they wanted him to be the rival to Tony Blackburn on the breakfast show. Well, dear old Johnny, he was never very good at getting up, so he overslept for 2 days. The message came out, get Day on the breakfast show, and that's where it was. But going back to the Twiggy bit, that was the courtesy of dear old Tatty Tom Edwards, because he was on the ship before the Marine Offences Act. And he was lovely. He showed me the ropes when I got on there as well. And everyone calls him Mother because that's the way he treated people. It was like having your mother, looking after you, bless him. And he happened to say on air, "Oh, we've got our new boy later on, Roger Day, but he's so thin we call him Twiggy." And then the pleasure boat came out, the Viking Saga from Essex coast, with all the young girls and everybody on there. And I was actually on air at the time, and I had the porthole open, and I could hear him shouting, "Where's Twiggy?" And I thought, hang on a minute, this is one mention on the air. There's got to be something in this. So I said, "Oh, okay, I'm Roger Twiggy Day." And I started getting letters, so I thought, well, let's go for it. Over the years, when I got to be 30, I thought, this is stupid. I can't call myself Twiggy. And I dropped it. But then I started getting messages from people saying, "Didn't you used to be Twiggy?" So I thought, oh, well,
Well, having known you, Roger, for many years, you still can bear the name because you're still very thin. I mean, you've always managed to keep yourself in shape. That's one thing for sure. And I don't know how you've managed it, because I know you like a beer or two.
Well, I do. I'm a great real ale fan, and people hate me because I can eat what I like. I remember on the ship, I wanted to be fatter, and I'd say to people, "Is that fattening?" And they'd say, "Yes." And I said, "I'll have it." And the rest would say, "We hate you, Dave."
Oh, I know. I hate you for it as well.
I do play a lot of sport as well, which helps, but it's just in a metabolism, I guess.
And I just want to ask you, before we leave this, about 20 years ago, in 2004, myself and some colleagues here at BBC Essex decided we'd recreate pirate radio off the Essex coast, calling it Pirate BBC Essex. So in 2024, it's going to be the 60th anniversary of Offshore Radio starting with Caroline, and it's also the 20th anniversary of Pirate BBC Essex, Easter 2004. And you were so kind, and you came along, and you've been part of Pirate BBC Essex every time we've done it. And thank you so much for doing that, because you made a dream come true for me. Working with you guys, the job that I always wanted to do, when you and Johnny were broadcasting illegally on Radio Caroline, back in 1967, I was so jealous. You can't believe it. And then to get the thrill to work with you guys in 2004, 2007, when we recreated, how did it feel coming back to a ship after all those years?
It was magical. There is something magical about broadcasting from a ship. I don't know what it is. It lifts me. It always has. I mean, I've had a long career in radio, on land-based radio, but there's an atmosphere that you can do on a ship which you cannot recreate on a land-based station. I don't know what it is. It's just you step on board and all of a sudden it's different. And I mean, to be frank, you guys, I got a lot to thank you for, because back then, 20 years ago, most radio become very boring indeed, playing the same old songs sort of, all day long and no surprises and not much personality, 3 in a row and just say the station name. And I'd fallen out of love with radio, to be quite frank. And then you guys started that, and I got on board, and we started getting such great response from the listeners via email and that sort of thing. And I thought, actually, I'm back in love with radio, and it inspired me again. And I was like a radio man reborn. And I've got to thank you guys for that, because it just inspired me again. And I still have that attitude. So I'm a born again radio man.
And just finally, Roger, how important do you think it is that we mark the 60th anniversary this coming year, the start of offshore radio? I mean, I feel it was a really important and a massive change for radio in this country. How do you feel about it?
Well, I have a feeling that most UK radio won't do anything to celebrate it, probably because they're all run by kids that don't remember the offshore stations. And that's outrageous, because without us guys out there, a lot of those people that run radio now wouldn't have jobs. So it's a bit like forgetting World War II and not, remembering that. Not that I'm saying we're as important as the people who fought in the war, but we made our mark and we established radio wouldn't be radio today without us guys doing that. So it has to be celebrated. And as long as I am alive, I'm going to be doing that.
And just finally, before we say goodbye, Roger, we must talk about Pirate of the Airwaves, because I've read the book and it really does go into great detail how your story evolved from those school days and how you loved Radio Luxembourg right up to virtually the present day, and all the journeys that you took along the way. Did it take you long to write it, or was it one of those books that literally just flowed? Once you started, the stories just kept coming?
Not at all. I started it 10 years ago.
No.
I think I wrote about 1.5 chapters. It was only moving to Spain that gave me the time, actually, I thought, well, I've got nothing else to do apart from sunbathe. I might as well do the book. And I just sat down, and I was very strict then. You've got to write a chapter a day, which I did. I'm quite pleased with the way it's turned out. I'm very pleased with the reaction to it, because I thought, who's going to be interested in this nonsense? But apparently people are interested in it, because I suppose I've been involved with more offshore radio than many people, and also land-based radio. So there's a good story, and all the stars I've met and interviewed over the years. So Yeah, it's that's it. But you can get it on my website. That's the best place to get it, because there seems some difficulty with bookshops and online people as well. And basically, I only get a few pence out of those people.
So give us the website address.
It's rogerday.co.uk, and it's all on there, and it's very easy to do. So I do thank those that have bought it so far, and those that maybe might buy it as a result of this. I do thank you very much for boosting the pension fund.
Well, Roger Twiggy Day, thank you for being part of our special programme this New Year's Day. We look forward to the celebrations, whatever they might be, come Easter 2024. And keep on rocking, Roger, because you are one of the great DJs of all time. You and Johnny Walker are my idols, mate.
Bless you, and thank you very much for talking to me. I do appreciate it, and thank you for all you've done for the people that love offshore radio, because we need more people like you. But let's hope this year is going to be a wonderful year, better than last year, certainly weather-wise.
Well, a happy New Year to you, Roger, and thanks again. Roger Day speaking to me just before the programme today. Lovely to catch up with Roger and hear those memories of working on the Radio Caroline and Swinging Radio England, as he did all those years ago, 60 years ago this year. Maybe you remember those days. Maybe you were listening, as Sal said earlier, under the bed sheets to the likes of Johnny Walker and Roger Day and all those DJs, Tony Blackburn, Kenny Everett. So many big names started on offshore radio, literally off the Essex coast. And thanks to WhatsApp at 254 for the photo of two different versions of our pirate BBC Essex mug, which of course started in 2004 on the LV18 just off Harwich. So if you were listening to that, thanks for doing that. And you know, the most requested record that we had in 2004 on the pirate BBC Essex was this one. And The Whiter Shade of Pale from Procol Harum. What a great song this is. So let's reminisce again one more time, shall we?